real important for smiths to get out and visit other shops and demonstrate for other folks. And that way everybody can
stranger we ever see.
I'm still a stranger. I enjoy demonstrating and visiting with everybody and seeing what they do and how they do it. This is the way I do this. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make a Colonial 3-legged candle holder. This is adjustable. It's got a little friction grip on it. Forged weld the legs. I'll show everybody how to do that. Just kind of put a little tendon on it. And then we'll do the little copper basin here and the thing for the little candle holder. But yeah, so material wise, what we're going to do is we're going to start with 8.5 inches of 1/4 by 1, and then we're going to have a piece of 17-inch by 1/4 by 1, and these are going to be our legs. So what we're going to start with is I'm going to center punch this one right here in the middle so that I know where we're at. I will work to it. All right, so that was just a center punch right in the middle. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put us a punch mark on the end of this, which is going to be 3/4 of an inch. And that's where we're going to fuller down for our leg. For our little foot, I mean.
Is this in the newsletter?
And then we're going to do the same thing with that other leg. We're going to center punch it as well. And the reason why I do it on the end is because I'm going to use a guillotine fuller, and with that punch on the top, I can see it. When I put it in that guillotine, I know where to set that at. And I'm not trying to guess. All right, so I've got this piece heated up. I'm going to bring it in this fuller, and I'm going to fuller down about halfway through this bar, maybe just a little bit more. If you don't have one, you can do it over the edge of the anvil with the peen. It's real kind of touchy at first, but you can get there. We're just fullering that down just a little bit. We're going to heat this up again, finish it up. I use coal there. That's about as thin as I want that to be. Now we're going to draw this out to the total length of this bar is going to be 9 inches beyond our foot. See how that's starting to look? So this is going to be our foot, and then we're going to taper this down. We'll work this just a little bit more, and then we're going to round that foot, flatten that foot out, and spread that foot. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
You have plenty of work.
I can smell the sarcasm on that.
I wish I'd have known you when I had that little Volkswagen Jetta diesel.
I'm glad you didn't. What I'm doing here is I'm knocking these edges down. I'm starting to round this up. So the rounder you can get this before you start flattening it out, the better result you'll have. Did you take a picture? Not yet. Well, hurry up.
And then you talk about a mess.
Right? All right, so here we are. This is about as round as I'm going to get it, and I'm going to start flattening that out and start to spread that out. Now, when we start working this, we're going to start in the middle of this, and we're going to go to the edges. The reason being is it's two different reasons why. One, it'll spread quicker if we start in the middle. And then if we leave the edge on the outside, we can use it to kind of fill in any spots that are flat, any irregularities. We can kind of form that around if it's a little thicker. If it's real thin to begin with, you'll never be able to do it. Now, you can make these legs a little shorter or a little longer depending on the size of the footprint you want on the table. Now, something else to remember, we'll talk a little bit more about it, is that the size of the spread on the feet has to determine how big the bowl can be on the candle. Because if it's overhanging the foot, it's going to want to fall over. So be mindful of that. All right, there we go. So there's our first leg, right there. And then the other two will be the same, except they'll just be joined in the middle. You got to be careful, because when you're running it down, you'll run that down real quick, and then you go, oh no, and you'll look at it, it'll be paper thin, and you'll have to cut it off and start over. I've never done that, but I've seen it done.
Open up the vent, freaking blacksmith come out.
Hey, we're not talking about snakes. No. No snakes, no spiders, no,
I
none of
evacuated
that.
that car. Three kinds of snakes I don't like. Little snakes, big snakes, and sticks that kind of resemble snakes.
Right? All right, there we go. That's us.
Remarkably close-ish.
Remarkably close-ish. Now we're gonna work on this end here a little bit, round it up. We'll start on our other side. I'm gonna do a little one. It's a little wonky here. I don't know what I did, but I messed it up some. But we're gonna make it work.
Yeah.
That's
I would
wonky.
recommend using straws.
We're gonna do the same thing we did before. We're gonna spread it from the center out. That should give us enough material to fix that little whoop-de-woo. That's a technical term, whoop-de-woo. Now see there, I almost got that out. Oh, now you want a picture of it. I fixed that little whoop-de-woo. Now we need to get this close-ish. Good. What I'm going to do now is I've still got that little bit on that side that's just a little higher than the other side. What I'm going to try to do is I've still got some material on the opposite side. So I'm going to flatten that out, make that side a little bit longer, and then I'm going to bend that back so that it covers that up. I cool that off a little bit. If you had a belt grinder, you go to that belt grinder and you clean that up. See how that is? I've just got just a little bit. It's right there, close-ish. So if you let your material cool off just a little bit, you'll really be able to see that center punch, they almost stand out. It'll be a little dark spot. So this is where you'll get in trouble. You gotta be real careful when you come back to it. Like I said, it'll move fast. So once we get these drawn out, get the other foot made, then we're going to bend it and we're going to weld that together. So we have 3 closest in length legs. Put the foot on this one, and we'll do our bend.
Is that 18 inches?
Yeah.
You don't add anything.
I do not. No,
Bigger the top, the more this.
I made one leg, and it's the way I like it. So then I just measure it, and then make my other ones to match. And like I said, you can scale this up or down depending on the size you want it to sit on the table. If you're doing a small end table, the legs need to be a little smaller. I'd drop these legs a couple inches.
So this design came from actual
The Colonial, yes.
depiction or?
Yeah, there are actually copies of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thicker on the edges where I pulled that some out. Yep, I can clean up all my edges and make sure that they're the same, they're nice and round. The thickness is off a little bit. I don't care too much about that as long as it looks like a round foot.
Have something to work with, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's the key. That if you start those edges, you get those edges thin, and every time you try to upset it a little bit, they'll roll on you. And then when you start fighting that, you just drive yourself nuts trying to get it fixed. All right, something else that I like to talk about is just a little bit of safety. When you're brushing stuff off, try not to brush it out into the people that are watching you. Especially if you're doing something, you bring it out, it's sparkling, and you go, oh no, and you grab your brush and you go, whoosh, and then all those sparks go around and everybody's watching and everybody's like, ah. No. Either turn your back and brush it or brush it to you off to the side. That way you're not potentially burning somebody, you know.
And that's what Forge Weld is just Gallagher.
Right, right. You know, we're going to do that in a minute, but yeah, if you can, kind of keep that in mind as you're doing it. All right, so we look good on that end. Just double checking my marks here. I put a mark on the side of the anvil so I knew.
Just reference that to that center punch you did earlier.
Yeah, center punch here to my mark here. So we look good on that. Now, so this is the hard part, if there was a hard part, because we're going to bend this on the hard, per se. The easy is laying it flat, like this, and bending it this away. To bend the bar this away is a little more difficult, and that's what we're going to do. And we're going to turn it pretty close to 90 degrees. Ish. And how we're going to do that is we're going to bring it out, we're going to put it in here. We're going to have our center punch hanging about a 1/4 inch on the outside of the jaw. so that when we bring this around, this is going to stay centered. If you brought it right up against the edge of the jaw, what would happen is it would be off. It wouldn't be in the center. And we're going to bend it from both directions the same way so that we guarantee that that center punch is in the middle. Alright.
Went by. He called in for sure. You send me a notice, call me or whatever, and I will make it. As of right now, I ain't gonna lie, you come from your body. I ain't heard from him see it.
So now when we go back in, we're going to go on the other side, and then bring that other side around. Center over there.
Stop moving. Thank you.
That photography staff is tough.
I'm telling you what.
You eyeball it.
So it's almost 90 degrees, not quite 90, but almost. So what I'll do is, because when you bend it this way, it wants to curve on you, so I'll straighten that out. I'll go back to the vise, I'll make my final bend to where I want it, and then that'll be it. And I think a lot of it is just personal preference as to how you want it to look. But I try to make it to where all of the angles are pretty close. And remember, always hammer the bend down. So that's almost 90 degrees-ish. Ish. We like that ish. So I'm going to heat this up, and I'm going to bend it just a little bit more so it's a little closer to 90, because we're going to hammer this, and it's going to change the angle of it just a hair. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to chamfer the edge where our other leg is going to come down to it. Right about there. So that's what I like. Looks like a boomerang. The good thing about a three-legged stand is that it won't wobble. So you,
Centered right there.
it is. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be.
Oh, is
Yes.
a little off.
Well, maybe just a little bit. I could center punch it again, it'd be perfect. All right, so now I'm going to heat it back up. I'm going to bring it, and I'm going to knock this edge down and prepare it for welding. So what we're going to do is right in the center here, we're going to knock this down. It's going to be our scar for our weld. Now we're going to prepare this leg. We're going to scar fit as well. So I'm just going to knock these corners down just a little bit, and then I'm going to forge this down to it. So when we bring this together, we're going to bring it together like so. All right, now, somebody mentioned it earlier, said you got to have your material hot before you put flux on it or it won't stick. A lot of people will flux in the fire. I don't do that, but I bring the material up to temperature and then flux and then put it back in. Something else that's worth note. Turn this off so I don't burn this up. When you bring this out and we put them together, I'm going to bring the third leg out on top of the two. And then forge weld it, starting at the fine end, the thin end, and get it stuck. Then I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to start at the thick end. Why do I start at the thick end?
Because it's thin end on the other side. Still got
Heat, correct. When you flip it over, after that little thin edge has been on that cold anvil, cold-ish anvil, it won't be hot enough. But as you work it from the thick end out, you can watch that little edge get hotter. And by the time you get to that edge, it's ready to weld. I had a problem sometimes doing that. I'd flip it over, I'd hit that little thin end, and it wouldn't weld. You have that little spot where it would come up, and then you're fighting it. And just recently, Tal Harris at the conference said, hey, don't do it this way. And so I tried, and sure enough, it works like a charm. And you can watch that little edge get hot as you're working it towards it. And remember to make sure that everything is oriented in the fire the way you want it. Because there's nothing worse than trying to come out of the fire and then trying to figure out where everything needs to go. Alright, I feel good with that, but we're going to do one more heat. Try to avoid putting green coal in the fire when you're welding. Try to make sure it's covering top and bottom with a good layer of coat. Don't leave that chicken alone. When you're forge weld, try not to put green coal into the fire. Yep, try to have coat top and bottom. And try to eliminate cave fires. Everybody used to preach that have this nice big hollow cave in there and you put your material in it. Well, that's an oxidizing fire, and that air circulating in there will cause that material to oxidize real bad. You won't be able to get a good weld. So I like having my coat sitting top and bottom of my material. And another rule of thumb when you're looking at your material to try to figure out if it's at a good welding temperature, well, you knife guys know this, but you want that top layer to kind of look like melted butter. Like if you put butter in the microwave and melted it, how it gets that kind of glistening effect on there, that's what you want.
I use propane in the inside of my forge lining. When I can't tell the difference between the metal and the forge linings,
You're good to go, right. Used to be the Dorothy Stigler taught a forge welding class at Murfreesboro 25 years ago, and her thing was that she'd pull the pieces out of the fire and she'd sling it on the ground, and if the flux came off the material, it was good to go. If it didn't, she'd put it back in the fire. All right, I think we're good. Now I'm going to center punch this where I want my hole drilled. And that's going to be pretty close to center. So now what I'm going to do, while this is hot, I'm going to turn these feet up so that when I roll them around, they'll be down. Turn them up, and then when I roll them around, that foot will come down. Just like that. We'll have to adjust them a little bit at the end, but that's going to get us close.
ain't never had a donut fried butter, you're in for a treat.
So here are our legs with the feet bent up.
Okay, turn around again
Without them in the picture, y'all need to move.
block the sun there.
I'm gonna let this sit and cool. You could punch this hole if you wanted to. I'm gonna drill it. So we're gonna let this cool off. So at this point, I'd probably take a wire brush and clean that off real good as far as with an electric wire brush. Or you could file finish it also. If you wanted to file work it, I would do it now while it was straight and then bend it. The stem first and then we'll bend the legs. So my stem is 21 inches. 21 inches. It's 3/8 round. So on one end we're going to taper, and then we're going to do a little fuller for a little design element. And then on the other end we're just going to neck it down as a rivet or tendon. So we're just going to neck this down. We're going to square this up, work this down as a square. The length of the taper is entirely up to you as to how long you want the taper, so it'll stab me in the hand as I work the bottom. When I taper this out, I'm going to smooth this over. So I went from a square to an octagon, and now I'm just rounding it out all the way. So now I'm going to bring that out and put it in here, and I'm going to fuller that around to give that little decoration at the top. Before you grab hold of it, put the other end in the fire. So now I'm going to make the tendon, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in here, and I'm just going to kind of clip the end of it off and just kind of mash that down as a tendon. Very close. So you see how that's starting to work that down? Just like our little decorative piece, but we're going to hammer that out into a tendon. So now we're gonna bring that out and we're gonna draw that in. So if you had a tendoning tool set up for this size, you'd be able to just run it through that tool and it'd be the perfect size. Alright, so when we bend the legs, we're going to do a little different. So I've got a bearing race. You can use anything round, piece of pipe or what have you. We're going to grab it here and we're going to bend it around. That way the foot will always be here, and we'll make a mark as to where we want it to end, and then we'll have the same kind of radius all the way around. And then if you wanted it curved in some, kind of like those are, you can bring it around a little bit more, which will create that curvature on the inside. So I'm done with my demonstration now. So you can take this back and finish it up.
Ben, 2 more. I didn't get that real good.
That's hard to say.
right, there's number 2. You want me to do this again? One more time?
Pay attention, Jeff. Come on, Jeff.
I'm wondering though, the feet's kicking down like this.
What?
Is that just my eyes or?
It is.
Okay.
They're straight to everybody else.
Okay.
Everybody else thinks they're straight.
I'm good.
Everybody else thinks they're straight,
That's where you
mount to a bowling ball.
right? It's in the back. It'll be all right. Hey, it works.
Or something, but
It works. It's all it takes. All right. Now, 3 semi-straight-ish legs.
Don't take place in the hole. Reach your leg.
Thank you.
Well, that was perfect.
That's pretty close, isn't it? I don't think I'm gonna mess with it.
I love it.
Sometimes when you're doing this and you're not quite sure what it's gonna look like, what I'll do is I'll draw it out on the ground.
What about that saw blade, Alan?
So I'll draw this up like this. I'll draw this around like this.
You can just use it for a flat surface.
And then I've got my legs out here so I can see kind of how my legs are. And then here on this end, it's gonna kind of come around like this. Like so. It's gonna come down, around like this. And then a little curve right here. Now, when you're trying
Is
to...
that little curve what's putting the tension to keep it?
This curve here, this curve here, and this spot here is
Yep.
what keeps the tension on it.
To slide it up and
Yep.
up. Awesome.
Comes in. Now I know that none of y'all eat kale, but if you buy kale at the store, it comes wrapped up in this great big thing. Now, you can take this,
Lettuce too.
yep, and you put this out here like this, and you kind of curl it around, and then you bring this down and around, and you bring it around. Perfect. And then you can measure that, and that's how long your stock needs to be.
Yep.
Now, I've already measured it on this one. So what I've got to have is I've got to have, for the top piece, it's got to be 13 inches. 13 inches. And then for the bottom piece, it's going to be 8.5. 13 inches.
FYI, if you take an old Stanley tape measure and lay it up against a hot piece of metal, that's going to singe it and you ain't going to be able to read the number.
Oh, absolutely. I've got one in there that's the same way. 13.
I thought I was just personalizing it, but it sounds like everybody's got one of those.
It's crashed. Unless you're measuring something over 2 foot.
About like that. Make a little finial out of it. Roll it over. Alright. So there's our finial.
yeah, she's actually grown some of her own pink oysters.
Yeah. Has got to be 8. What did I say? 8.5. I mean, you're not taking notes?
No,
What kind of deal is that?
I'm relying on Mama. Like you do. Relying on the boss.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So if you cut that off then, and then you put it in the quench tank and cool that off, it'll snap right off. And then you don't have to work it back and forth trying to break it off.
Don't step on it though.
You know what you do? A lot of smoke comes from out from around your foot. Thing that we did on that other one, we're just going to flare it out a little bit. We're just going to push this down over the edge and then roll it up. Little glancing blows. Here, and we'll go, that looks pretty close. Does that look straight?
Yes, sir.
Alright, it's
With
all
my
it's your
crooked
fault.
eyes, it does.
Alright. Between the end and our rod,
Did you hammer those?
I did.
Cool.
I'm going to finish hammering it here in just a second. All right. A 2.5 inch circle out of it. And I kneeled it, and then I hammered that glancing blows, and that's what's going to give it that texture. Is that we can look down through that socket and make sure that that center punch is center. That way we mitigate the chances of the bowl being, it's too late now. All right, you ready?
Yes, sir.
So that little rivet set really helps out to hold the little top of that thing and makes it really nice. Hammer in here. Down here in the bottom of this thing.
Wherever it falls.
Yeah, pretty much. I try to have it up against the edge a little bit.
Yep.
I heat the bottom of that copper up just until it melts. And when it'll melt, it'll run to the outside. And see that one right there just melted. There we go. And that's it. That's all we want right there. There we go. Now, this will go over the front leg.
What's your initial on it?
Yep, right there. And
Mhm.
so